Welcome to another Forensic Happy Hour. And where does the time go? These weeks continue to go by faster and faster, which could be good, could be bad, or everyone's seen the movie like Groundhog Day, because sometimes I do wake up and think it's the same day as it was before. And I have to remember, actually look and see what the days of the week. But hey, it's Friday again. Beers are in hand. Hopefully, you guys. It's 5 o'clock somewhere. And so interesting because my guest today, we were just actually talking before the show. And one of the things, obviously, when I was inviting him, I remember, and we didn't know it was 2014, but 2014, which seems forever ago. Well, actually, yesterday, maybe. But when he was winning at the DFIR Summit, he won the Investigator of the Year, which is to me bitchin'. So I have Santiago on here, and I think we're going to have a great conversation because I think obviously drinks in hand, and I guess we'll watch what happens. Excellent, and good to see you.
Good to see
Cheers
you.
again. What 2014 we were talking about.
That's
Which,
correct.
again, I'm like, hey, it seems like a long time ago, but honestly, it it looks like both of us we kind of yes, it's been a long time maybe because you gray, I have gray in my beard, those types of things. But honestly, it wasn't that long ago, right? So what I want you to do is just introduce yourself to everyone. Let's talk a little bit about, obviously, your career, where it started, how you started it, what you did, and then what you're doing now.
Cool. Let's start by saying it does feel like a long time ago. At least I am feeling it. I was just telling you, I'm trying to read serial numbers out of equipment, and I'm just going like this, like this, like this until it's too far away for me to read
Yeah, yeah,
it.
exactly.
So I actually was born in Venezuela, Caracas, Venezuela. And back then, as a kid, had access to computers all my life. I think my first computer was an Epson Abacus, or also known as a Q1-10,
Mm-hmm.
which, by the way, was not the high end that they came out with. It was just a 64 kilobyte of RAM, and I think you had to load BASIC with a couple of 5 1/4 discs. So I was you know lucky enough to have computers in a country that was just not common, and that actually got me involved in computers. I broke that computer maybe 100 times uh, every week.
Right, right, right.
Uh, Time passed. I went to school in Venezuela, the University Central Venezuela, for engineering. I started in chemistry, changed to geological engineering, and then the situation of the country turned sour. I decided to come here for a year and went to the actual town where I live in, Bradenton, Florida, and studying English for a year, which apparently did not work very well because of my accent. Uh, and then I came back to Venezuela to try to finish school, and I decided to start something completely different down there. So I went to school for marketing, and at the same time, I had a computer company called Inversiones PC 2020. It was back in 1998, and I was living in 2020. I don't know why.
Okay,
Which
no one
is
ever
this
wants to be
year.
living in 2020, man.
It's
No one, right?
crazy. In fact, I was just looking for the website just recently, and the website is still out there on archive.org. And
Oh,
I'm
fantastic.
ashamed because it's a terrible website. uh, so, you know what happened in Venezuela, right? Things turned sour with President Chavez. And my mom, dad, and sisters were living in the US. And she always kept telling me, why don't you come live with us here in the US and just get your citizenship, your residence? So after a big coup against the president, where we were marching against the government, and I saw people getting killed in front of me, that was it was the time for me to say, Mom, I'm taking on your offer. Time to move out. So in 2003, I moved here. And lucky enough, I met a couple guys that were starting or that had a computer forensic company, a father and son in town. And I remember going to interview with them, not about computer forensics, because my real background in Venezuela, what I had worked for 10 years, was graphic design for medical laboratories. So I did all their, their material, their boxes, or medication, stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
So I remember going to the interview with all my portfolio, and they started asking about computers. I was like, well, yeah, that's my hobby, and that's what I do for a living. Have you ever, done recovery of deleted files? Like, yep, I used WinHex back then
Right.
to recover data. So they hired me right away, and we started this process, and here I am. In 2015, after 10 years working with them, I started my new company, ATX Forensics, with a cousin, which is an interesting story too. Back in Venezuela, I had this cousin that I had lost contact because he had moved to the US when I was 17. And during my first 3 months working at this previous company, I remember I was helping a government entity with a website. And I remember that I needed high resolution logos for that particular website. Mm-hmm. So I called their office in Houston, and this guy picked up and says, hey, it's Ray Jeffs. And I'm like, Ray Jeffs in Houston. Do you, by any chance, know Ramiro Jeffs? Jeffs. And he's like, it is me. So I'm like, no way. What are you doing? And he was doing computer forensics back then. He had a company called the Cyber Cop in Houston. So we, after so many years, we were doing the same things, working in the US as computer forensic analysts. And 2015 was the year when he actually retired from his previous work, and it was perfect timing for me to start this company, which now actually has 6 years almost. It's just crazy.
Crazy. So one of the things that you bring up, I mean, that is it is, and I've said it in several of the shows. It's crazy that, I mean, you weren't in the computer forensic side of it, right?
No.
You tinkered with computers, you kind of did this stuff, but you really kind of, your life was, something completely different, right?
Completely different.
And so, it is, I'm telling you right now, you talk to so many people that are in the industry right now, and they were like, I didn't even know what this was. I was doing graphic design, I was doing web design, I was, developing applications, or writing code, and then all of a sudden, now I'm doing computer forensics. So explain to me. I mean, what is it? Do you remember how you said, "Oh, this is cool," and you kind of shifted from the background or the path that you were on to now saying, "Man, this is some great stuff."
So I think it all came down since I was a kid too. I remember looking at the last portion of the newspaper when people actually read newspapers and actually got their hands tainted with ink. Because that last section of the newspaper had the section called successes, which were actually crimes that occurred in your country. So I remember reading about crime and always been intrigued about how this happened, how did this occur. And then, I read a lot of literature about crime and police work. So it was kind of, leaning naturally towards that investigative type of things, even though I never had a formal education in that particular area. So when I got to this company in 2014, I remember they were starting, the company had some time, but they were still very young. And we basically started learning together, and we had a big case. I remember started looking at the data, starting trying to reproduce artifacts that I was seeing. Back then, I remember starting, sysinternal tools and plugging a USB device and check sysinternals and regex. It's like, what happens when this occurs? because these guys are looking if this guy took data with a flash drive. So none of these tools that are automatically parse everything existed back then. So I love that portion of it, and love the fact that every case, even though they had something in common, were different. It was fun, and then the real key, I think, they all had value to me. I was helping somebody. I was helping either a company protect their assets. I was helping a person actually prove that they were innocent, or I was helping, I was helping a company protect against crime. So I fell in love with it. And I'm not going to lie to you. I also, during that first year, I think I prepared 3 or 4 resignations letters because we were exposed to a couple of cases where, you know, we had terrorist, communications on it, or cases where, you were sending somebody, or the product of your work was going to result in sending somebody to jail for a pretty long time. So I struggle with the moral side of things,
Yeah.
Eventually I said, hey, I did not do this. I'm just uncovering what these guys did.
Right.
And it is only fair just to show what really happened.
Yeah.
So
There's interesting things, especially about doing that. And, again, going and moving on to and doing on to the forensic side of it, but, seeing the human side. And what's interesting about that is, a lot of people don't realize that. I mean, you look at digital data, and there is certain things, from a law enforcement side of it, if you're dealing with, child pornography, and every day that you're dealing with those types of cases, or even homicides, and you're doing all of that, you see kind of, you get a little jaded by that, right? But then, even, and now if you're talking on the civil side of it or whatever, if you're uncovering this data, there's still a human behind it that either, produced it or is part of that data stream. So, I mean, how would you, I guess, how would you suggest or give people, an idea that might be getting into this, help them understand that, I mean, there's a mental, you need to make sure that you're, I don't want to say mentally fit, but, how do you stay healthy mentally by being into the situation? It's not just simply looking at, oh, okay, fantastic, this is all the hex, it's great, I go home and I'm fine. Because if you're doing your job well, and I'm not speaking for everyone, but if you really want to get into it, you get into it and you don't just shut it off, right? So
right.
I guess, are there any recommendations that you might have for people?
Well, what you just said is very important. I think my first recommendation is be thorough. The work that you do will affect the life of a person or the life of a company. You can bring a company down, or you can actually, help them protect what they actually invested all their life. So make sure that you place yourself in a mindset that what you're doing is completely disconnected from interests, right? From either side. Be, be transparent and do your job as best as you can, so you can uncover whatever data actually tells you.
Yeah.
That's my recommendation to people,
Mm-hmm.
getting in the field. If you're dealing with a CP, child pornography, I had the opportunity to work to a couple cases, not many. I was not in law enforcement, so it's always been on the defense side of things. Make sure that the person that hires you, the defense attorney, knows exactly what the person did. And your job there is not to defend the person. Your job is to inform the attorney what the evidence says, so he can actually prepare a case to better serve his client. As it's in my experience, and I haven't done many cases, most of the time, people that actually download CP gets pushed out as a pedophile or crazy person immediately without having the chance to have a case.
Right.
And they get published in the newspaper and they get chained publicly. And the law is pretty clear. They have the right to defend themselves.
Right.
And I'm not defending what they do, because I consider if they do it, it's outrageous. It's not right.
Right.
But I have cases where the guy that supposedly did this did not do it.
Right.
So, it's important that you actually, like I said, set yourself in a completely impartial stage, even though you're hired by plaintiff or defendant, and just look at
Yes.
the data as it is.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's, I mean, that takes me into kind of a next kind of question is, I mean, it's, always about data. Data's data. That type. But how important is it for that investigator to really have an understanding of the data, or can they just get simply by utilizing the tool to tell them what they think it should be, right? So tell me a little bit about how important it is, in your words. I can give you my words, but how important is it for you, if you want to get into this field and continue in this field, that you know what the hell you're doing?
So, very, very important. Back then, when most likely you started this and I started, we did not have those tools that were, the Forensicator Pro, right? Like, it got published back in Twitter a long time ago. That tool that actually you were hitting a bottom and the evidence just magically appeared.
Yeah.
That, of course, helps a lot nowadays, to prepare a data set and just push it out in front of you. But it's very important for you to know that, the actions that occurred on a system were triggered by a certain set of instructions. So when you see something, I always recommend try to reproduce it. It doesn't matter if you know about this, if you're a super expert, if your tools are telling you this is here. Go through the whole process to make sure that what you have in front of you, you can reproduce. That way, and only that way, you can explain to the audience what really happened.
Yeah.
So it is, nowadays there's a lot of people joining the career, and I love it because we need people. But I will hate to think that most people sometimes just presses the button
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
pushes out a report, and the report is, it's the end of it.
Right.
So
Right. Yeah.
reports are.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And I think that, obviously tools, and you have these that are going to go and handle, certain things, but it doesn't matter. I mean, a tool, or however you frame it, you don't want to say, I mean, the big word that everyone uses this year, right, is narrative. But quite honestly, if you are looking and you can go and replicate exactly what has occurred, it's not necessarily a narrative. It becomes fact, right? It's not necessarily a tool that you're looking at it and it gives you this part of the picture. But if you're able to go in and if you can replicate it, the action that produced that, right? So if you know the action that produced that, you can go in and utilize, obviously additional resources for that. So again, I think that's extremely important that people understand. Really, it's not just a fantastic, I just bought this and this is going to do everything for me. I'm going to become an investigator in this world. It's a lot of work, right? And not only a lot of work, I think it's not the 8 to 5 job. If you think about it on the forensic side of it, because you might have your 8 to 5 job, or you're dealing with your customers or your clients, and now you have these hours where you're like, oh, you know what? This is weird. I need to go and find out what's going on, or I need to research. And there's a ton of research that's out there. So on the research side of it, I mean, what do you do to prepare yourself or to better yourself for the investigations, as it's changing so much in forensics? I mean, the devices are changing so much. So I mean, what do you do, and what can you give some people that are watching? What kind of things that you can help them out with?
So definitely technology just changes every day, right? One of the things that I do, and I know Kevin Pagano is like an expert doing this.
Yeah.
I play CTF, and the reason that I do is they keep me sharp on new evidence that comes out every day. I know that the developers of the CTF purposely put portions of the whole game that
Yeah.
are something that just came out. And playing the CTF keeps you sharp in
Yeah.
new artifacts that are out there every day.
Yeah. Yeah.
Also, think about what we do. This is science, and treat it like a science. Just come up to your computer, turn it on, select a small hard drive, and write a process. I'm going to do this, but write it down. Don't just go at it and play it.
Right.
Just write it down with a scientific method. And then after you finish, analyze it and see if your hypothesis, what you wrote down, match what you find in your analysis.
Yeah.
It's definitely a science. So
Yeah. It's funny. I mean, you start thinking about it, and I mean, I don't want to say I'm just a freak, but it's I mean, if you get a new desktop, something you want to install on the desktop, do you like run process analysis? I mean, I actually run the system to see exactly what it's doing all the time. It does a couple of things, right? It makes me feel better about it's not writing some crazy stuff out to somewhere where it shouldn't be. But I mean, do you, how many people think about that? I mean, that you're doing that just for yourself, but you might be doing an investigation on a device that person isn't doing that, right? And you might be looking for something, and if you start talking about IR stuff, where you might have something that infiltrates the system, you have all these. I mean, how do you know? These things that are installed, I mean, what are they doing? There's so many free tools out there that allow you to actually run and look at kind of the processes that are running
yeah.
within that. So I mean, are there some examples that you might get, or some tricks that that someone might benefit from that as part of your process, what you might do?
Uh, it depends on each case, right? Again,
Yeah.
it's a per case type of things, but play around with these internal tools. If you have access to, you know, tools like Bit9 or Carbon Black or Red Canary tools or CrowdStrike tools, uh, just execute software and see what happens
Yeah.
on a test machine. That's going to be a lot faster than going through the internal tools. But to be honest, if you go with the raw tools, the Process Explorer, the Rec Explorer, you're going to learn a lot more because you'll be surprised when you start a process. Not 3 lines of code actually occur in your system. It just blows your screen with logs, right?
Right.
So you're going to learn a lot. Back then, there used to be a tool called In Control 5. I don't know if you're familiar with it,
No.
which basically recorded a lot of the API calls on the systems. This is Windows XP time.
Mm-hmm.
If you have a Windows XP, you download that tool and
Yeah.
play with it so you can see what actually occurs on the system, even though Windows XP is not, or supposed not to be out there anymore. It's
Right.
just for you to learn what really occurs, honestly.
So again, how important is it that people stay up to speed on the versions of the operating system? There's so many that it's going and it's moving and continual updates. I mean, again, how important is that people stay up to date? If you're dealing with iOS, going from the different updates of iOS or of Android or of Windows or of Mac. I mean, is that important for someone as a digital forensic examiner to make sure that they're up to date on those?
Super important. And they do come out every day, and every time there's an update, something breaks, and there's no evidence that comes up and shows up. Thankfully, we have a community that actually likes to give away a lot of secrets and research. Go through the tweet feeds about
Mm-hmm.
what's out there, new things. I think Fillmore has a blog that is fantastic because he basically resumes what everybody does,
Yeah.
every week and puts it out there. And then, of course, test. Do your own testing. Uh,
Yeah.
you know, you may collect a mobile device with a version today and collect the same mobile device same day and have completely different outputs or present 100% completely different problems. So
Yeah.
just play with your tools.
Mm-hmm.
If you have time to do it
Yeah.
during work, awesome. But like you said, our job is not 8 to 5. I
Right.
do
Right.
go out of my office and I close that over here, and if I have a problem, it stays in my head through the whole night. And
Yeah.
it's like, could this be, what created this artifact? Or maybe
Right.
this, make sure that you write it down, and come the next morning and test it, right? So you can,
Yeah. So let's talk about that because my favorite things are artifacts. I love them. I mean, there's so many of them that you can and I mean spend hours upon it. And honestly, as you say, when you update, an artifact that you saw was super bitchin' that you might look at, it might be completely different, right? If I start talking about, because I deal obviously with mobile devices, and if you're talking about SQL or other type of database formats or any type of other file, different versions of the app might completely change the entire scheme, and it might be just all different, right? So I mean, what type of artifacts? I mean, what are you dealing with day to day? What's your favorite kind of? I always ask for the go-to, or I mean, give some people some nuggets that they might walk away with. I know that everything isn't always the same. Well, it really is never the same, but there are some certain things that you might look for, whether it be doing computers or doing mobile devices. I mean, what are some favorites for you? I mean, you can do multiples.
yep. So, of course, there's not only one, there's a bunch of them. But on the mobile world, if you have access, I love the user dictionary.
Yeah.
The user dictionary gives you a lot of information about what that user did, right?
Mm-hmm.
A
Mm-hmm.
geolocation on the mobile device is amazing too, right? And not
Yeah.
only what our tools parse, because there's a lot more out there, right?
Oh yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
for computers, the typical, depending on the case, right? If it is, trade secrets, I go to the registry, see what devices were connected, any potential cloud storage. I love the index.dat for Internet Explorer. Love
Mm-hmm.
that particular artifact.
Yeah.
Link files are amazing. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
of course,
Mm-hmm.
people get smarter nowadays, right? I had cases where where the guy did not took the data with a USB device and did not took the data with a cloud. And I'm like, I know he took the data because they took the client list and they are
Right.
calling the client list, and we have a, a member, a contact on the client list that is a ringer, and they're calling him. And
Mm-hmm.
how did they took this data out of this computer? The computer doesn't
Right.
have it, and we have found out they took pictures on
Ah.
a mobile device, right? So
Mm-hmm.
you think outside the box.
Yeah.
What did this person had while she worked? Because the computer didn't show anything, and
Yeah.
this particular person took 100 pictures of the client list, and then went through the work, through the job of
Yeah.
manually typing them down and send
Yeah.
information to a lot of people. So just approach each case with your best guess, follow your guts, and
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
follow your knowledge, I guess.
So if we look at, let's talk about a little of this is with cloud, right? We have, especially now, people working remote, a lot of things. Well, I don't want to say just because remote. I mean, it is everything, but there's a lot of stuff that is stored within the cloud, right? And that people have with the cloud accounts. What are you seeing? Are you utilizing, doing more investigations with data from the cloud? Or are you still dealing with, that maybe that static data that might be sitting on a drive somewhere? Or, is it 50-50?
It's 50-50, but I do get a lot of clouds, and thankfully there's you know, some technology out there that actually sometimes is unbeknownst to the client. They're just pushing data all around. iCloud, syncing your profile to your work computer and to your home computer may provide a lot of information about what you did on your home computer on your work
Right.
computer.
Yeah.
I do a lot of business email compromise cases, which is all cloud.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Microsoft 365,
Yeah.
maybe 80%
Yeah.
versus Google Suites or other ones at a lower percentage. So
Mm-hmm.
the information is out there. And
Yeah. Yeah. So how important is it for an investigator that's coming into this, might not necessarily just be concentrating on, all right, this is what I do. This is the computer. This is computer forensics. But really, kind of thinking outside the box of understanding, AWS and those types of storage, because a lot of companies even before this, have been utilizing those AWS or workstations that they're able to go in. So how important is this someone to be prepared to do an examination of the data that's contained within these repositories, right? Remember in the old days, it's VMware, and you would do an investigation. You're like, oh, this guy doesn't have crap. And, you're like, oh, actually he has a couple of VMs that he does all his work in, right? Now we have the VMs that are all based upon the cloud and not stored locally. There might not be much information that's locally, just that they access it. So how important is it someone getting into this industry to understand that technology and be able to do and perform an examination of the data within there?
It is very important, but that comes with a problem. There's so much stuff right now.
Yeah.
Back then, we had the computers and maybe a couple
And
mobile devices.
little floppy drives.
Yeah, actually, I have around here a Bigfoot drive, which is like humongous, and I think it's 400 megabytes. So right now we're dealing with terabytes of information and 100 types of different systems. That said, the scientific method can be, used on every, platform. Your hard drive, your cloud. Just read about it. If you don't know what you're doing, find somebody that knows what he's doing and learn from him, right? Do not actually sell yourself out. Oh yeah, I'll do that just because you want to make money. Just go under somebody. Be smart enough to know I cannot really help my client with this case. I need to hire this group of people that are experts at this and learn from it, right? So.
So with that being said, though, I mean, should people start? I mean, more of a targeted. I don't want to say triage, but really, so you should have a game plan. If you have, your client is this part of the case, but I have access to this. Should it be more targeted? Because you're exactly right. Is that there's so much information, there's so much data that's out there. It's no longer saying, oh yeah, don't worry about it. Let's just show up, let's image these bad boys, and let's get out of here. We're talking about not only just terabytes. I mean, we're talking about just so much information. So, do you see more of your investigations now as kind of targeted type, grabbing that information, get that data? That's what you need.
They are, and there are amazing tools. Yeah, I think Eric Zimmerman has Cape and some other. All his tools are amazing that are actually built for that. To collect certain information that may provide a high probability of getting information that is relevant to the case. Brian Moran has with Brian Moore Labs has a tool that you can use to remotely collect a lot of volatile data from systems. Download it, play with it. Those triage are going to be very important. Right now, we don't deal with what you and I dealt, 15 years ago, which were 2 computers. We may be exposed to 100 computers, 1,000 computers, or 400,000 computers across the network, because I've done that. Know what you're.
And so. Yeah, and so I 100% agree with that. It comes down to, and I think that's why a lot of, I don't want to say a triage because necessarily triage as they used to be, right? I mean, they're targeted, and they're created, I think, because of the massive data sets that we do have. Even if you start talking about mobile devices, how much information that's out there, within the cloud, that's extremely crazy and difficult to deal with. So, in grabbing some of those, I mean, as part of the cases that you're doing now, are primarily, I mean, what would you say the majority are dealing with? Is it an IP thing? Is it an HR thing? What are you seeing, the majority of your cases involving? Not necessarily the data, but just, I mean, an overview of it.
Yeah. So the majority of my cases are intellectual property theft. The typical employee left the company, and either the company is doing a collection just to make sure that everything was, the way it's supposed to be, uh, or just they caught people leaving the computers or the companies red-handed taking information out
Mhm.
of those companies. That I will say that is about 50% of what I do, and then I will say about 35% is incident response type of work. I do consulting for a couple large companies in the U.S.
Mhm.
and
Mhm.
business email compromise. So a big portion of that incident response, response portion of it,
Mhm.
and then a lot of mobile forensics. Nowadays,
Mm.
when cases
Yeah.
come through law firms, there's always mobile devices involved.
Right.
All the
Yeah.
investigations nowadays. So,
Yeah. Yeah, and I would say I would, and I'm just speaking, just from what I know is, especially if you're coming on from the law firms. The law firms pretty much have to do with a mobile device, right? Whether if it's whatever type of case it is, but those be involved in it. Do you see that the data that you're looking at now, or the devices that you're looking at now, would you say, I mean, are you asked for more mobile device in the investigations, or the investigation involving mobile devices, or is it split between, computers or any type of IR?
I will say mobile devices is the highest percentage, and sometimes I don't even understand why. So mobile devices are just an interface. Most of the data reside on cloud servers. So
Mm-hmm.
it's a matter of education to the attorneys too. They want to collect the mobile device because they want to get the emails that they read
Yeah.
on the mobile device. Like, guess what? The emails are
Yeah.
they're not here.
Right.
They're somewhere
Yeah.
else. So, or they want those Facebook messages or the Instagram
Yeah.
messages,
Yeah.
or so.
Come on, man. It's just a small phone. I can get it all off of here
Oh,
right
but you got
now.
the
That's what.
512 gigs, version of it. It should be plenty for a lot of information.
Yeah. It's all there. It's all there. Yeah, I know. Yeah.
So I usually
Yeah.
tell my clients, you just put your phone in airplane mode and go to Facebook and see what you see. Nothing.
Right.
It's like exactly. There's nothing.
Exactly.
So
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
of course
It's
nowadays, eh, Apple or Android devices are getting more secure.
yeah.
If you're not law enforcement, you can only get so much out
Right.
of these
Right.
devices, or if there's not a known, exploit that you can
Right.
apply to
And
those devices. So,
that's not to get into the weeds, but why do you think it's so hard for people to understand the availability of data within a cloud service, the accessibility, especially, I mean, law enforcement, it's a little bit different, right? Especially if someone's saying back sand, you're not going to get anything, I'm not getting you your credentials. But if you're outside of law enforcement and you have that information, how I mean, how is it that people don't understand that these are kind of transactional devices? A lot of the information is going to be stored within these different, or on these different servers that are storing it. So, I mean, how do you educate them? I mean, I loved what you just said. Put in airplane mode and try to go to it, and you're like, oh crap, yeah, okay, I don't see anything. That's probably the best thing you do. But I mean, how do you explain it to them further about, oh man, we have this? Is it just like, okay, give me this information so I can access this cloud? Here's the data, and they're like, oh crap, really? All that information?
you know, I think first step to educate attorneys about this is when they approach you and they tell you you want to collect a mobile device, ask them why, right? Don't just take it because your company needs to make money.
Mm.
And he's like, because I want the Facebook messages. Just be 100% sincere and tell, we'll collect the mobile device out of due diligence, but you're going to have to subpoena Facebook for this data,
Mm-hmm.
which, by the way, brings another big issue using that particular one, uh, including that export your own data out of Facebook does not export all the data
Right.
that you had. You may have actually posted something and then edited that post. When you export the data out of Facebook, that edited version does not come out. So
Yeah.
there's not many tools out there that pull it out unless a manual.
Yeah, and so that brings up another great point. I mean, you keep bringing up these great points. Is that, I mean, once you as an investigator need to be educated, not simply to do your job, the way that you want and you believe it should be done, but it really comes down to educating your clients, right? Educating your clients to the non CSI version of the world, right?
Right.
Of giving them the information of this is the truth. And I mean, if you're not armed with the first part of it, is really understanding that, you can kind of give your clients a, there's an expectation that they're going to have
Correct.
of what can be just based upon fantasy, right?
Yep. Be upfront about it. Thankfully, I'm in a small company nowadays, and I tell my client how it is, and they decide to either to move forward or not. But larger corporations have sales teams, and
Yeah.
their purpose is to sell.
Right.
So expectations are set up badly, and I'm pretty sure because I've been on that end portion of it.
Yeah.
When a sales guy actually brings you a case and provides the expectation that he gave you, it's like you as an examiner, it was like impossible. I'm not going to be
Yeah.
able to do this. So
Yeah. Yeah, that's my example of, a detective, it brings in this phone to you and like going, dude, it's just a phone. And here, can you give it to me and go? Yeah, I'll be here 5 minutes because it's, boom, just give it. So again, I think that's exactly right. Is setting the expectation up. I think that's extremely important that you would do to the client. Again, I don't want to keep you too much longer, but there's a couple of things. One, love the stormtrooper that you have behind you, which brings up something that I said I was going to ask it because I simply love it. Is your Twitter handle, and there has to be some explanation because I see people's Twitter handles and I'm like, man, I gotta ask them about it because that's just really important to me. So
yeah.
give us some info.
So Darsac, so Darth Vader, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure if when I was a kid I was ahead with a big stormtrooper or maybe my Falcon Millennium fell on my head, but I have a fixation with Star Wars. I think
Yeah.
maybe bigger than Rob Lee's fixation with Star Wars.
Oh.
Just to give you an idea, Yoda right here. Spice.
Exactly. Right there.
And as what when this whole internet started, I guess I was one lucky kid that had internet in Venezuela, which was unheard of.
Right.
I remember dialing at maybe 7 kilobytes per second.
You hear that sound? Is that you still dream with that sound and hear?
Oh yeah, yeah. And my mom getting pissed because I was actually occupying the telephone line.
Exactly.
So back then, I joined a bunch of chats, and I think the only way to hide my identity on the internet was using that alias. So I used DAR, SAC, and SAC are my initials. Santiago Alejandro Ayala Capriles, being long name like most Latin Americans have.
Right.
So I kept it all my life. And then when Twitter came out, I think I joined Twitter pretty late because I'm not a big social media guy. I decided to join with Darsac, just to keep that identity. And I dressed up. I don't know if you've seen the little.
Yeah.
It's a Tweety bird,
Yeah.
and I just
Yeah.
made the Star Wars.
Yeah.
I dressed them up. So that's
No. No, it's fantastic, and I mean, yeah, and it's been this. It has been the same ever since I've known that, and it's interesting. Is I was actually talking to someone I think might have been yesterday because they were asking about okay, would your kids if they looked at, I mean, they've seen obviously the Star Wars and the new Star Wars and you have those things, and I'm like, you know what, man, I remember seeing Star Wars. I mean, I think it was 1976, somewhere around that. I remember my parents taking
you
me
saw
to a
Star Wars in
drive-in.
1976.
What's that?
You saw it at 1977.
It was when it came out, and I
How
my
old are
at buddy, I'm old, man. I'm old.
you?
Yes, I'm old.
Oh wow.
Yeah, and so it was at a drive-in in the back of my dad's pickup. I remember watching that show. No, I just dated myself. I'm telling you right
My
now.
first
But
memory of Star Wars in a movie theater is pretty pathetic. Because it was the Ewoks movie.
oh, really?
Yes.
Okay.
And that's what I actually recollect as a kid because I was
Yeah.
born in 1974.
Yeah.
And I do remember how much that particular movie theater cost because I used to live across of it. It's like 5 bolivares, which back then you could buy $1 with it. Today is I think it's over 1 billion bolivares per dollar. It's
Really?
just crazy. Yeah.
Wow, that's crazy.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, we're dating ourselves. My goodness, yes. So, we had talked about the last thing that I want to bring up, because I think that one of the things that has been kind of a theme throughout all of the shows that I've done is really community. And I think that that's extremely important for people to understand that there are people out there that are able to go in and either produce something, put documents together, do whatever that or reach out. So what advice can you give to someone, or where can you tell them that they can go, in and get support? I have a certain problem doing this type of investigation or whatever, or have questions, or even want to research or find out about research, or, try. What kind of recommendations, or where can people go?
Twitter is a big place for it. Like I said, Philsmore has a really nice collection of blogs. But more importantly, reach out.
Yeah.
I have learned that if you reach out to the people that is out there basically writing the books, basically paving the path of digital forensics, they are, I will say 90% really nice. They will get back to you and they will provide feedback. Also, if you are in a position to teach, be a mentor. I always, kill myself for not posting a lot of information that I know I had back then earlier that I could share, that could help. Where I used to work, they like to keep that information as a
Yeah.
treasure. Uh, but that information is important because
Yeah.
what I told you before, we're just uncovering the truth, the facts, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Be a mentor. If you know somebody that can be a great analyst, just grab it under your arm and pay him, pay for, if you can, for a couple of certifications for him. Start with simple ones like the CCE. It only costs, I think it's like $500 for them to try and provide him, books. And I have a bunch of books here, and I usually offer them to kids that I know. Hey, are you interested in this? Come to
Yeah.
my office,
Yeah.
read through my books, and I will pay for your certification. That way you can start, paving your future, your career. And
Yeah.
thankfully for me, it has panned out. I have people that I mentored that are now sitting at really important directed positions in really large companies in the US. So
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, I think that has changed a bit, for the last 7-8 months, and I think that there has been more information that has been trying to get out there and trying to share with people, because I just really I think that people are finally realizing that information should be shared, not just held tight to them. The information needs to be out there, because if you're not sharing the information, wait a month and somebody else is going to share the information that you thought you should have, right? So I think that is extremely important. And there's several resources. I know Brett Shaver just put something on with the chat, with DFIR training, and he has put together and shared some books and has some great things out there. Like you said, with Phil Moore, has some great
this
things out there
Discord
as
channel
well.
is great for
Oh, Discord channel. I mean, those guys have knocked it out of the park
fantastic.
and have been just doing a great job. So again, there's a lot of great resources,
Yep.
that are out there, and I think exactly Brett Shaver just sums it up in the chat, saying never underestimate the power of asking someone a question,
Never.
and I think that's important, right?
Very
I mean, just go and ask someone the question, and I think that you're going to, I don't want to say you're going to be surprised, but you're going to get an answer for someone. They're not going to just say, whatever,
You will
I'll do
always
that.
get an answer, or they will actually point you in the right direction for you to find it.
Exactly. Yeah, you never want to get an answer if you don't know the answer, right? You don't
That's
want to
right.
make something up,
That's
right?
right.
Just point them to someone else. So, awesome. Again, it's Friday, and that was 50 minutes. I'm sorry I kept you so long,
Oh,
but
that's
I
perfect.
wind up
I
I
give
wind
you
up talking a whole
50.
bunch, and I want to say again, my beer is gone,
Mine still
so
has
I
mine,
want to.
so I'll enjoy it after.
Yes, you enjoy it afterwards, and we'll do this again. I appreciate you coming on, and I guess working so hard and being such a great member of the community. So keep up the great work.
My pleasure.
Awesome. Another Forensic Happy Hour down, and it is just, you know what? I just every time I put this together and talk, I'm just the guy that just asks weird questions. But honestly, the people in this community have been spectacular, and I do appreciate everything that everyone continues to do with this, because I mean, we cannot continue unless we don't obviously stay together and put some great information out there. So, should be back next week. I think I'm going on vacation, but I enjoy this so much. I'm going to dig someone up, and we're going to still do this. It might be a recording, so you might not be able to watch it live, but we'll see. I appreciate everyone, and everyone have a great weekend. Thanks.